All right. Well, welcome back to Harry Potter Talk, or whatever this is that we're going to be calling it. Hey, Miss Sarah Miller. Hey, Mr. Wesley Schantz.
Hi.
And can we all hear each other now? We had a little technical difficulty on the first attempt.
Sounds good.
I can hear
Good.
you.
We don't want to. We're like Ron after he breaks his wand on the Whomping Willow and attempts to cast spells and ends up cursing himself and nothing working quite right. Poor Ron. And so, oh man, I have to start this podcast off on sort of a frustrating note. So even though we started a little late due to me being late on my lecturing, I had a whole 20-minute segment on chapter 5, and just like the glass for the boa constrictor, it just vanished on Anchor. I watched it upload for like 10 minutes, and then Anchor froze, and then it disappeared forever. Oh
Man, so sorry.
Bummer.
yeah, well, so one thing I've never experienced with Anchor when I'm actually recording with somebody else, though, is I've never lost any of the segments with you, Sarah, or with Wes, or with both of you, or with Daniel Babcock. And so, well, I have a lot more faith in this working out. So I guess where we left off last time is what chapter 3, right? And so
Yeah.
so we there was a big boom at the door, and so we're getting into chapters 4 and 5, and we're meeting Rubius Hagrid, and seeing the Dursleys get cowed, and then learning all about the magical world and Harry's true parents, and seeing a wizarding bank with goblins and possibly a dragon, learning that there are cold and ruthless Dudley-like individuals inside of the wizarding world too, and that there are wands and creepy wand makers who give us piercing and sharp looks, and that our wands are all totally unique. And so, what did y'all want to talk about today? I mean, I think definitely Gringotts and the wands are the most interesting parts to me. But what were y'all thinking?
Wes?
I had wanted to talk about Hagrid to start out. I think he's he's a really interesting character. We briefly met him back in the introductory chapter, and we saw a little bit of this. I don't know if it's a prejudice or if it's grounded in some previous experience where McGonagall kind of asks Dumbledore, is he really the best person for this job, this very, very important job? Are you sure about this? Right? And Dumbledore seems to trust Hagrid, whereas other people, like that snooty boy in the robe store, just have some strong negative opinions towards him. So I was curious to look at Hagrid a little bit.
Yeah, I too find him a really perplexing character. He doesn't perplexing might be the wrong word, but intriguing. He doesn't really seem to fit in either world. In the Muggle world, he takes up a ridiculous amount of space, and everybody looks at him funny. And he, in his own world, he seems to be an outsider as well, just by virtue of his size, of course, but also maybe by virtue of his unkemptness or his uneducated status. I'm not entirely certain that we know just why Professor McGonagall doesn't trust him or has questions. I mean, we later learn a lot more about him, but he seems one of those characters who doesn't fit in either place, which maybe makes him a little bit like Harry, at least Harry right now. So I find him interesting. I think the way he talks is interesting. She doesn't have to use kind of like the natural style, like the Mark Twain style of writing when she's writing how anybody else speaks. She doesn't make it clear that they are uneducated or that they have an accent, but she does with with Hagrid, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, something about him that I wanted to consider is I consider him something of a hermetic or mercurial spirit, like a psychopomp, a sender between the worlds. He himself goes between worlds on a flying motorcycle, which is itself a representation of two worlds, right? Like we discussed, like science and magic wedded together, and terrestrial and celestial wedded together. And he himself is two natures wedded together, giant and human, we will find out. And so he is also literally an outcast in that he was expelled from Hogwarts and yet still exists within and without in sort of a limbo space in a cottage right outside, just inside the grounds, right on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. And so he, like sort of an Enkidu figure from Gilgamesh, seems like sort of the savage man, or the liminal space between nature and culture. He's like Odysseus when Odysseus is about to sleep under the two olive bushes, one savage, or rather one uncultivated and one cultivated, on the island of Scoria. And so I think it's interesting that he comes about first to deposit Harry in the Muggle world from the magical world, or a place of death to now a place of life too, and now comes to the Muggle world in order to take Harry now to the magical world. And so it's like he introduces Harry into the next stages of his life, and sort of like Hermes actually literally does that for Odysseus in the Odyssey. He shows up after Odysseus has been trapped for 7 years on Calypso's island, commands her to allow him to leave. So Odysseus has to come up with his own ingenious device.
I'm not sure if you like looked it up, but I looked up just because Alex, on one of your previous lectures, you talked about like what you thought the word Potter meant. I definitely think like the names of the Dursleys are, obviously so common and kind of almost cacophonous. But Hagrid, part of his name is comes according to this like Harry Potter lexicon website or whatever. So who knows how legitimate it is, but this person says part of it is partially derived from the Old English for a word for someone who straddles the hedge, or the hedge as a boundary between the village and the forest. That like this word that part of his name comes from, this Old English root, is for a figure, I think a feminine figure, but
like a hag.
who would have a foot in both worlds. It might eventually evolve to also be related to witch,
of course,
because certainly those women were seen as having access to information that was not proper to humans, though maybe they were just really unruly and smart women, who knows. But I just thought that was funny.
That's interesting because just even further evidence that point, when we meet Professor Quirrell, it is Hagrid himself who says that the reason that Quirrell now stammers, though he has a brilliant mind, is because he took a year to get experience in the field, ran into vampires and a hag. He got messed up by a hag. And interesting about Quirrell is that he is himself now possessed of a dark thought, or is now housing the disembodied head, body, soul thing, or remnant of a soul of Voldemort. So he himself is like a straddling an edge. He's like a figure of Janus at this figure, like January, like the door god of the Romans. And so that's interesting that the hag, like Hagrid, would be a figure straddling that which is natural and cultural, because Quirrell is sort of, I don't know whether it's good and evil right now or what it is, but he is divided at the very least in some way or another. But yeah, what were you thinking, Wes?
Yeah, I was just kind of interested in the way that Hagrid shouts down the Dursleys, and Harry is somehow like apologetic for being the reason for this big fight between them, And Hagrid sort of emphasizes to Harry that he has nothing to apologize about, that he's the one who's been done wrong by this whole time, and uh, then there's like this exchange whereby Harry now has to keep a secret for Hagrid, though, right? So now Harry's gonna not tell anyone that Hagrid's using magic when he's not supposed to, right? He's in cahoots with him now. So they've got this very close knit friendship kind of immediately. That's got this very important little secret at the heart of it. This trust, which seems like the kind of trust that Dumbledore has for Hagrid. He's expelled, and yet he's kept on as gamekeeper and keeper of the keys and trusted with these very important jobs. So
that's interesting. That almost makes me think as if like there's like an Adam and Eve connection there, at least in the Miltonian sense, in that sharing a transgression together creates a great trust between individuals. Whereas, like, say, if you give somebody the capacity to hold power over you freely, that's like the ultimate gesture of friendship. You're basically like saying, I'm not going to play this game. If you wanted to out me or injure me in some way, you could. I freely acknowledge that. And so in making that acknowledgement, that establishes the basis for friendship, because it establishes an equality in that we're not going to compete against each other to be I don't know, more righteous or something like that. We're not going to compete on that plane where I attempt to destroy you and you destroy me, but rather we're going to cooperate. I like that idea. Yeah, and Hagrid does do that a few times, right? He shoots the tail onto Dudley, revealing his inner nature. He lets the oars do the rowing for him back to the shore. And so he also sort of kind of brings up, even more than he should, for Vault 713. I'm not even exactly sure why it is that Harry is allowed to be on the same card as he is when he goes down there and to look into the vault itself, if it has the greatest secret possible there. I suppose there might be a connection between what is the most valuable thing in the wizarding world, the new young wizard, the figure of the hero Harry, or the Philosopher's Stone. Two things that have been ignored and hidden away for about 10 years, as Grip Hook says, because Philosopher's Stones are hidden, or 713 is only checked on every 10 years. And so I didn't even mean to go down that rabbit hole, but that's very interesting that the Philosopher's Stone and Harry seem to be very much connected in that respect. And they're both things which can transform and are being transformed at this very moment.
That's I think it's almost like Hagrid wants Harry there to keep him safe in a way, right? Hagrid seems like very scared of the bank, and Harry's still like kind of over the moon about being a wizard, so everything's exciting even though it's dangerous. So it's almost like Hagrid's got him there as a security blanket in this case. So it's funny.
Yeah, it is interesting that when Hagrid does experience some increase in social capital wherever he goes with Harry, because now Harry goes from being that kid who gets made fun of because he has shapeless clothes on and broken glasses and is getting beaten up and ignored by his family, to wherever he goes. He meets the stateless Diggle, he meets the head of the leaky cauldron. All these people look at him and they say, "Oh my gosh, Harry Potter," and they treat him with such deference. It would be like an orphan's dream, essentially, or like any kid's dream to all of a sudden be, for seemingly no reason at all, treated with deference. Justin Bieber, as it were. And for no talent whatsoever that you have of yourself. But I wouldn't know. I haven't heard of it. I'm forgetting my point, making fun of people like I usually do. Why don't you go on, Wes? I'm sorry.
No, I mean we can go down into Gringotts. It sounded like you had things about that you were interested in looking at. I'm kind of more interested, I guess, in just the whole general transition into this magical world of which Gringotts is a pretty interesting example. But I think there's a lot there going along with the leaky cauldron and this new identity that Harry takes on. in Diagon Alley, which is just a cool place. So
Yeah, I was thinking about what Diagon Alley might mean, and I think Diagon, like the diagonal. So when the Pythagoreans figured out that the existence of the diagonal proved the existence of irrational numbers, it supposedly sort of shattered their belief in a rational universe. And so the idea of a diagonal, which does actually can give you an irrational number, or at least like a mixed number, not a whole number when you're measuring it, which can mess you up in the first stages of mathematics, that it's sort of a figure of the irrational. In fact, Socrates uses that as a training device in the Meno, right? He says, okay, well, now take the diagonal. Oh, what do you think this is? And then he shows the slave that he's wrong. He's wrong. And so it's as if it is confrontation with the irrational that expands our domain of consciousness. That is exactly what's happening with Harry here. He's now experiencing something totally new and anomalous and taking on a totally new identity as he learns more and more about it, which made me just think that Diagon Alley, as the place where all magical things are sold, represents the irrational aspects of life and that which truly has value in life, and that what is magical, or that which is magical, is precisely that which is precisely that which you cannot fully explain or know or understand. It's the spark at the tip of the wand.
Right. Even the wand maker doesn't seem to know exactly why certain wands match up with certain people. But he's delighted by the chance to try on all these wands with Harry. Right. It seems like there's something very inarticulable about the combination of things that makes up the magical world. Like we saw before, right? Hagrid is expelled. He has his wand broken, and yet he can still do magic as long as no one tells on him. And that's because of this kind of personal connection that he has to magic, to Dumbledore, to Harry, right? So it seems like these kind of these trust relationships, these personal relationships, have an element of irrationality about them, but that is like essential to them actually working, right? The magic actually going like it's supposed to go. It bears thinking about.
Which is why I think it's interesting that they're there to buy school supplies. They're not there like on a, just on a, like, oh, let's go learn about what this world is like. Like, they're both preparing. I mean, Harry's preparing to enter and to become a student of this thing, like to study this thing that is even to the smartest or the most well-known, or even to the most powerful people in this world, there remains something ineffable. I think it's interesting that education seems to be the heart of the activity, at least that Harry embarks on, in this place of commerce. He's buying school supplies. They go to a bookstore. There's all these titles of cool sounding books. He seems to be naturally intrigued by the magic relating to friends and enemies, or dueling, which is an interesting detail that I think foreshadows some of his future skills. But everything is for a purpose of study. So what does that mean for what kind of learning happens in this world if the ultimate end, or the ultimate thing that binds the whole world together, is something that there's never an end to the learning, I suppose. I just think that's interesting. Seems so. And the moment where I really felt like that was most oddly funny to me was like when they're in the bowels of the bank. And I don't know if you guys ever had this experience when you were like in 5th grade geology class, where you learn like the difference between a stalactite and a stalagmite. And I remember exactly what the difference is. And it sounds like kids in Britain learn it the exact same way as we do in America, that, the one with the G is for the ground and the one with the C is for the ceiling. Obviously, Hagrid doesn't get it right, but
spelled different.
but like, uh, that to me is like was like a that's like not real learning. Like, that's memorizing definitions. But yeah, it's like, we're all teachers. It's the lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy. It's like, whereas it seems like the learning that they're going to have to embark on is extremely experiential, and you're going to be studying under professors who are masters of a subject. But if even Ollivander, this ancient wand maker, even if to him there's something that he could still learn or be interested in, or find curious, or like awe-inspiring, I don't know. It's a different kind of education than I think a lot of people get to experience in the primary world. Anyway, that's what I thought was cool about this chapter.
Yeah.
Well, so Ollivander, and just one thing is, Wes, was Sarah cutting out at all for you during that? I was experiencing a little of that. I just want to make sure it was on my end and not on the recordings part.
Yeah, I have had some audio issues throughout this, so I got the gist of it, but there was definitely some cutting out there, and some of it was a little hard to follow though.
Yeah. So Sarah, you're just it was like cutting out every like 10 words or so, just like go up and then you would come back down. And so that's the only reason I didn't immediately engage with your thought, because I was just kind of putting it together, and I wanted to see what was happening there.
Sorry about that.
It's totally fine. It's we're we are all the Ron Weasley with the broken wand, while subject to this technology, which has also given us the capacity to do this all at once. And so
yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know how to fix it.
It's fine. We are ourselves a leaky cauldron, and so Ollivander, I kind of want to talk about those wands a little bit. So I wish I'd had time to do research on the sorts of like tree that each of them were, but let me see. I do have it here. So we get insight into Harry's wand, his mom's wand, his dad's wand, Hagrid's wand, and Voldemort's wand. And so his mom's wand is 10.5 inches long, swishy, made of willow, good for charming. His dad, 11 inches, a little more power, transfiguration, and mahogany. Voldemort's 13.5 inches, made of yew, with a phoenix feather on the inside. Harry, 11 inches long, made of holly and phoenix feather, which is a weird combination, and it's supple and nice, so I guess well balanced. And Hagrid, of course, has the 16-inch, so broken in half, so effectively 8 inches, which is an interesting comment on his like sort of education, right? Because just as he has like sort of half an education, 3 out of the 7 years, he has half a wand, and so perhaps he had tremendous potential, but in some way or other didn't live up to it. Or I'll have to think more about him, because he does seem to be that figure of, he is very like Enkidu to me, very like the Beast Man, and not to keep returning to him. But something interesting about, I was just looking at the sort of stats on James and Lily's wand. So James has a stronger wand than Lily, also a longer wand, and his is good at transfiguration, which you might consider abstract manipulation of space in the world, sort of like what you can imagine in your head, and then you transform something into that in the world. So it's like abstract spatial reasoning, I would say. And then her wand is good at charming, and charming is so richly connected with attraction. And just something interesting that Milton says about the differences between the sexes is, he says that Eve was made for beauty. She had even longer hair than Adam, and that in fact she was very much proud of this fact, and found Adam rather wanting after looking at herself in her reflection for the first time. And that Adam was made for strength and logos, or logical thinking, sort of like abstract spatial reasoning. And so I thought that was sort of interesting to find that lurking in here, even in talking about the difference and wands are perhaps personalities, or like sort of inanimate, in the inanimate representations of a wizard's personality. I thought that was interesting to find lurking here. Not only that notion of the differences between the sexes, but also that sort of fantastic trope. And we've been talking a little bit about fantastic tropes of that thing which is not you, which represents you, sort of like in the Philip Pullman series, the Golden Compass series, how one has one's daemon or soul outside of oneself. Here you have this, and sort of like this, there's this anime show called Bleach where you have a sword which has a soul, like the idea of the samurai. But here you have a wand which has some special magical substance on the inside, either a dragon heartstring or a unicorn horn piece or a phoenix tail. And it somehow chooses you, so it has some sort of consciousness too. So it is like a part of you that has been outside of you your whole life. Or how do y'all interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a traditional kind of idea that the world is full of kind of personality, soul or whatever you want to call it, and that the wand is some kind of well, it's measured, right? And so there's this element of logic to it where that seems like one of the three important things about the wand is how long it is. And then the other two, you have the natural world in the form of the wood, which is important, but then you also have it in the form of this magical beast or this piece of it, right?
Oh, wow, very good, Wes.
So you get this kind of trinity going where you've got the measurement, you've got the material, and you have that sort of indwelling animated soul piece of it, and somehow all those three things together represent the wizard who uses it, but even more than that, they show the person something that they didn't know about themselves until that moment. And in that sense, I think it's significant that like Sarah was saying, like this whole thing is about education, and the sort of the truth of the education is implied that it has to do with self-discovery, right? And that is like fused with knowing something about the nature of life as a kind of animating force throughout the cosmos or something like that. So it's really interesting. I think the most interesting thing about the wands, though, is that we discover that Harry's wand, the feather in it is the twin, the brother, right? You got this kind of connection with Voldemort himself. So
and so that's something interesting about that I wanted to mention, and I want to loop you back in, Sarah. And I didn't mean to shut you down by mentioning the audio thing. So
no, that's okay.
Jump in as much, So don't even worry about that. But so the idea that something about Voldemort's wand is it is tremendously long. It's 13.5 inches long, 2.5 inches longer than Harry's. And the length of a wand seems to indicate some measure of its power, as just like a tentative hypothesis. And so something said about Voldemort is that he did great things, terrible things, but great ones, like Ta Dana or whatever in the Greek. And I forget the exact expression, like the many horrors. But it seems to be partly because he over-focused on power, sort of like Ganon or Ganondorf from the Zelda series, who receives the part of the Triforce, which is power, not wisdom or courage. And is that even though he was as a singular figure tremendously powerful, he didn't hit every aspect of life. So Harry has an 11-inch wand, and he's going to be expected to stand against this figure. And even though he's not going to be personally as powerful, perhaps he in sort of like the heroic fashion that we see in, say, like superhero movies when they all join together, like the Avengers, or in this crazy Infinity War recently, perhaps one adds best to one's own power through what you were saying earlier, the irrational connection of trust with others. So Harry will not have himself solely unilaterally more power than the figure of darkness, Voldemort, but will have access to the greatest power, which is that irrational trust that connects people together. Perhaps there's some idea that the greatest power is not power at all, but connection, or unity produced between individuals. And I feel like I do see that distinction between their two wands. Not to mention the fact that Harry's is also nice and supple. It seems to be balanced. It's a balanced wand.
Yeah.
Rather than,
I was gonna. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, first of all, Wes, I really liked that idea that the three things, like that idea of the three that we get to know about each of these wands. I think it's interesting that, for most of them, until we learn that Harry's wand is a twin of Voldemort's, we don't know what the magical core is of the other ones. But we are told that like the options are unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and heartstrings of dragons. And while all three of those animals are not found in the primary world, I think most readers would know. I mean, even when I was 11, I knew what a unicorn and a dragon was, but I didn't know what a phoenix was. I'm sure I didn't. And probably, but I mean, obviously the fact that the two of them share a phoenix feather seems to be significant because of the three magical monsters, the phoenix is the only one that has kind of like this regenerative, like this like odd relationship to its own life and death. But to me, I think I like that idea, Wes, that like part of education in this world is like coming to know oneself, and maybe know why that wand picked you, or what your relationship is to this object that helps you, this object that really becomes your lens in a way, or your way of relating to the world around you. So when he takes the wand that ends up choosing him, he felt a sudden warmth in his fingers, it says, and it releases these red and gold sparks like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls, which to me is like a foreshadowing of his placement in Gryffindor because of the colors. But that idea of finding oneself in like these feelings of warmth reminds me a lot of like Ignatian discernment. And how do you come to know who you are? It's through examining where you felt consolation and where you felt desolation. I got to point out, Thursday was the feast day of Aloysius Gonzaga. And so I was at school and I was thinking, other feast days, and Harry Potter and St. Ignatius have the same day. Like Harry Potter's birthday and Ignatius's feast day are the same, which like Ignatian spirituality puts like a heavy emphasis on feeling, on imagination and emotion. So discerning the movements of one's own emotions and imaginative prayer by imagining yourself in these biblical scenes. I have, now that I think, given that I like worked in that field and then also grew up in that kind of education, it's hard for me not to see those overlaps, but because they really are both about coming to understand oneself, and like one's, as Alex said, one's own relationship to nature and other people in one's orbit, which I think is interesting.
The Ignatian connection, if I caught that right, you're saying it's his birthday is the feast day for Ignatius.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Yeah, we do get a little bit sort of about like time brought up here, where we get the schedule. We get the schedule for the school year starting on September 1st, where or at least that's the day he has to take the train, right? So we're sort of clued into, on the one hand, Harry Potter's birthday is an important date, and now we know that the school year is going to kind of, if we didn't already, right, we know that that's going to kind of like structure the rest of the book. But I was I was like struck by how long it takes us to get to Hogwarts. Like I had forgotten that even the first book, 100 pages in before you even get to Hogwarts. And I think that length only gets longer with each of the other books, if I remember right. So uh, it's an interesting like kind of bridge that Hagrid forms here, and Diagon Alley forms, and kind of getting all the magical accoutrements ready, right? But it's like this long build up till we actually get to see, what is this book actually about? Like, what is going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
She spends an awful lot of time like drawing you into the world and aligning you with the characters in these interesting ways. Yeah, I just found it plot wise kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like we start in an intermezzo rather than simply in media res in the middle of things. But we do start in the middle of things, usually in sort of the middle of the summer with the other texts, which is it always gives us something to look forward to, which is interesting. We're looking forward to going back to school, at least in this magical world. Something interesting I just noticed because of both of you though is that Harry's birthday, 7/31, is all the same numbers as what is located within the Gringotts dungeon located in Vault 713, suggesting potentially that what he is going down there to get is sort of like what Aladdin goes down in the Cave of Wonders to get, which is that shabby looking thing of little worth, which is the alchemist's stone, which will transform his life, of course. Something else just tangentially sort of related was the idea of we were talking about connection, and we're talking about the magical beasts that give their essences to the wands freely. I think seems to be the idea that though I don't know that the text necessarily it does indicate that, because the phoenix chose to give 2 of its feathers, and so there's a connection between the soul of the wand and the soul of the person, suggesting that, like a soul of a human is something as fantastic as like a phoenix or a dragon or a mythical creature, which made me think, and this is just a tangent, but when we first met Professor Quirrell, what he said he was looking for, what brought him to Diagon Valley, or Alley, excuse me, was searching for a book on vampires. And so later in the text, we know that he, like a vampire, is going to try and suck the blood of a unicorn and stay alive. And so there seems to be, with a cursed life. So, and I'm just putting together the thought here now. There seems to be some, I don't know, an explosion of connections, but some connection between the idea of whether one receives the blessing from the magical creature to use it, or whether one does not, and how that might determine whether the gift is a cursing or a blessing. I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the most ambiguous characters here are the goblins, right? Like, are they good? Are they evil? They're sort of nasty looking and greedy and all that, but they also right. And but then again, Ollivanders, like you mentioned, is pretty creepy too. So there's something ambiguous or ambivalent or something with the nature of magic here again, where we're seeing that it's either unclear whether it's good or evil, or it might even just be something other than good and evil. It's like outside of those normal conventional sort of definitions entirely. I wanted to read the
Yes.
bank motto because I think it's great. Since we're talking about going through archways and bridges and transitioning into the magical world. So here's what it says on the doors. Silver this time, with words engraved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there. I find it very interesting that we get the word sin there, right? The sin of greed. Speaking about sort of the interesting kind of parallels between the magical world and the religious world, or something like that. You know, souls and magical beings, or sort of supernatural beings. But also the admonitory tone of the whole thing is sort of humorous, and that playfulness that runs throughout is part of what makes me wonder. Sorry, makes me wonder, like, you know, how much is this a thing about good and evil, and how much is it about something else entirely, like sort of awe or numinousness about the world, which is transcending kinds of definition. So, I don't know.
What's interesting with Gringotts as a bank, or that which stores the accumulated wealth or substance of those who have lived before, and with wealth or treasure itself being seen as a cultural artifact produced through the efforts of others. So it's a place of accumulation of culture, and it's maintained by these sort of soulless, not soulless, but like sort of lifeless functionary bureaucrats called goblins, who seem to know, they're sort of like all misers or cynics. They seem to know the price of everything, but not necessarily the value of anything. They're like cogs in this workplace. And what's interesting is that they, as also symbols of sort of lifeless tradition, they what how to put this exactly? They sorry, I'm losing it. Well, you go down. Let's see. They maintain your wealth. You go down there. They're figures of tradition. I'm sorry, I lost exactly what I was going to say, and I'll think of it in a second. Always with those terrible branches. I'm sorry so much.
No, I think I'll come back to the idea, and I don't want to be redundant, but maybe because I don't know if maybe I got cut off in the recording, but I think it's interesting, Wes, what you say about how long it takes to get to the school, because it really, to me, like, the fact that they go to a bank first, and as you said, Alex, that's the first thing that they do, obviously, because you need money to buy anything. Even though it's as much of a magical world as this is, it's still a world based on, you know, economies and, you know, commerce and the buying and selling of things. But it's a place to store knowledge, or it's a place to store money, but Hogwarts is a kind of bank, which we'll find. It's just its wealth is measured in other things. And if what he finds in the bowels of Gringotts is this grubby little package wrapped in brown paper, and as you were saying, Alex, that's kind of maybe tied to Harry himself. Like, what if there's something like alchemical about the process of education?
Yes.
You know, like that. There's except alchemy, to me, I always thought of it as like a trick. You know, like a gimmick,
yes.
like a con. Whereas transforming that which doesn't know into something that does know, that doesn't seem like a con to me. I mean, it certainly, if it is, then all three of us are in the wrong job. But like, you know, I'm not promising somebody I can, you know, get them into Harvard. That's not what we do as teachers either. That would be the con, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I guess I really do think, like, I mean, everything is sort of centered around education. Like, one scene that I think we haven't yet talked about is like when Harry is alone in the robe shop, and he encounters this boy, and as Wes noted, this kind of like yucky boy who we don't get his name. Like, he's yucky, and we don't even know who he is, that his name is a gross name. Like, it just has these, like, I don't know, these tints of danger and ill will once we do find his name. But like, even from just his behavior, though the two boys are wearing the same thing, they're reduced to kind of looking similar. You can still see that in their similarities, wearing the same black cloak, they're like, what's at its core is different. Like, his core is rotten, and like the cosmetics of things are not important. But to me, I think that that's sort of related to what education can do with the core of things. It makes me wonder if somebody like Draco is redeemable.
Well, and something just something about your point on alchemy is that Dante locates the alchemists amongst the falsifiers down very deep.
They're liars.
In the eighth circle of the eighth circle, and I believe in the eighth Volga or pocket of the Inferno. There's something interesting about alchemists, which connects to the quote on the Gringotts' second double doors, is that one thing it tends to point to is the existence not only of good but of bad. So if one's focusing on all the gold down in the underworld and in an education, one should also be prepared to understand that there may well be a dragon, or that in order to get the gold, one might have to put one's hand in the feces, as it were. That there's an, like Wes was suggesting, with both magic or reality itself, there seems to be an underlying there seems to be a light and a dark aspect. There seems to be a good side of the force and a bad side. There seems to be an entirety to it that an environment has. That if there is going to be gold, it is going to be protected by something that understands the value of it and does not want to part with it. And that when you go, and I think this is emphasized also by the cover to the American edition to the book, where you find Cerberus like Fluffy the three-headed dog in the bowels of the castle to the right, that the alchemical idea and perhaps the educational idea is that true learning is not only learning about all the good things that have happened, but all the bad things too, of learning not only the good aspects of human nature, but the truly evil and malevolent ones. That gives one a complete picture of things. The gold, like the sun in the sky, and the feces, like that stuff that's dark and earthy that you flush below. But you need to see it all in order to have a picture of reality as it appropriately is, in order to act appropriately within it. Otherwise, you're either mired in the mud and just think everything is terrible and you're depressed, or you're spacey and floating away on your mind cloud, leaving your body and your life to fall into ruin, sort of like a Luna Lovegood or Lovejoy figure. Lovegood?
Lovegood.
So I thought that was so I'm very interested in that alchemical symbolism. And I something the Jungians say is that most of the alchemists were charlatans and falsifiers, but a couple of them seem to understand the essence of it like that. And that's something very interesting. Wes, what do you think on that?
I was trying to, pick up on this topic with respect to Draco and whether he is redeemable. Was that sort of the gist of your question, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. We haven't really seen him enough to know whether or not that is, but just that, like, you've got. I'm imagining the scene, and they're both being measured for these giant black cloaks, and they're both new. They're going to be new at something. They're both alone, and they're the same age. One of them has enormous amounts of knowledge, or thinks he has a lot of knowledge about where he's going and what he's going to be learning and where he belongs. Yeah. Thinks that he knows who he is and what he deserves. And one of them, at the end of the chapter, he says, like, I have no idea how to do, and Harry says, I don't know how to do any of this. And yet they are made to look the same. And so if the educational experience is an opportunity for our protagonist to come to know himself through the educational process, if it's about, if he's chosen by this magical wand, then so is this nasty little boy, who he looks the same as. I mean, but for the colors of hair, and the glasses versus the lack of glasses, they are uniform, literally. That was my question. I don't know that we've seen enough of this character to know if he, to know if his core is is incapable of transformation, the way that I think just to pull along the like the idea that education is the good kind of alchemy, and not the con.
Something interesting, and I know we were going off on just a branch for you, Wes, about the redemption of Malfoy, but the idea of them being in uniform there seems to be an equality of opportunity idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
That even though Draco comes from a rich wizarding family that has been in Slytherin forever and is pure blood and seems to have every advantage in terms of knowledge and wealth, that even people like Hermione or Harry's mother Lily, who have no knowledge of the wizarding world, just like Harry, can also go there and can be put at the same starting line as all these wizards. And regardless of their family and what they have and what the tradition has given to them, it will be their actions by which they're judged in the world to come, in this in the adult world, or the world of university that leads into the adult world, the finishing school, the secondary school, whatever they call Hogwarts. And yeah, Wes.
The way that Hogwarts, we're told, is able to kind of encompass all of the Slytherins of the world, which we hear about a little bit here, and also the Hufflepuffs of the world, which we hear a little bit about from again a very prejudiced point of view, but nevertheless we get these kind of bits and pieces there. And yeah, it seems like there's a kind of aspiration at Hogwarts that all that matters there is talent in some sense, right? Like you can have all the different kind of personalities and backgrounds and be different in every respect, but as long as you have the talent, the potential, or whatever that represents, then you're welcome there, and you'll find people who will bring you into their house, and you'll sort of belong. And that's such a huge thing for Harry, where he's he has no idea, only recently has learned that he has this potential, but he still doesn't really belong anywhere, and so he's got this kind of goal now in mind, at least, but we also see the negative side of that, right? Like, because with that belonging can come this kind of clannishness, this ambition, this the dark side that the Slytherins seem prone to. We're probably reminded of the word Slytherin and the snake thing with Harry, so we might have that kind of on our mind now. And then, of course, we also see what happens to Hagrid, where you can get expelled, right? Like, this is not just like a guaranteed thing. You can go wrong that way too, where whatever it was that Hagrid did or happened to him, he's kicked out, and yet still there's a kind of forgiveness there. So we sort of start to see the whole picture of what Hogwarts is about, and what it has to do with potentially redemption or unfolding of people's potential, at least.
And I think that gets us back to what we were saying about like our investigation earlier about wands, which is that, I mean, the way each of the wands are described, it's like with language of action. Like, you could only know that Lily's wand was swishy by trying it. Right? Like, you only know if the wand has chosen you by holding it and moving it about, raising it. It's activity that seems to really start to identify or individualize characters. To Alex's point earlier about they have this equality of opportunity, but that it's actions that will set people apart. I think that that's an important part of what they're setting up in this world. Even when all these characters are being described, like the goblins look kind of scary. Ollivander looks old and wise, but also super creepy. That our judgment of what wand is good for you, or who is a good person or who is somewhere in the middle, isn't or can't be based upon simply how they look, or what, but what they do. And so, I mean, maybe Ollivander, we can judge him as creepy because he is, I don't know. when people have that kind of memory, I find that creepy. Like, oh yeah, I remember you when you came into my store 35 years ago.
Well,
That's
like
weird.
something creepy, he seems to get under the skin or see what lies beneath. Something
Right,
interesting
so-
about that is that with the wands, we also see that different strategies towards life and towards behavior can net the same results. So if Lily's sort of a figure of the feminine, well, she has a swishy or bendy wand. She seems to be very agreeable and charming in personality. She has the ability to focus outward on that which she sees and manipulate it in an emotional way, whereas James has a more forceful or transfiguring wand, where he actually physically will transform the reality around himself in a non-relational way. And the reason I would say they are equally successful as strategies towards the world is that they both had the same child, right, Harry, and they both came to the same end. And so they're equally successful in that respect, though they have opposite ways of doing things. And so just to continue to, not advocate, but rather illustrate the point that we've been following along, that equality of opportunity, it's that the ways by which these wizards and witches are successful in the world are so much more manifold than we could possibly even simply classify simply by looking at them or gendering them or something or like that all of the ways that we do categorize them, like putting them into a house or having a certain length of wand, are just small, are not full encapsulations of the being of the wizards, but are rather small representative samples of what they truly are. I mean, obviously there's much more to Lily than the fact that she's, like potentially swishy and charming. But the idea that she could have such an opposite way of interacting with the world and yet still be just as successful as somebody who actually explicitly transfigures it or changes it to bend to his will in the final analysis indicates that, that humans seem to have the most diversity of seem to be the most diverse possible creatures, not based on how we look or even the ideas we have in our heads, but the manners of behavior we use, and the ideas driving those behaviors, which lead to our ability to survive in the world, and particularly the complex version of the world that we play in. We're not just like, in caves or in trees. We, are interacting via social media at this very moment from several different states away. And so it's almost as if wands are of infinite variety, because the idea is that humans, though we are one species and all connected, are also of infinite variety in terms of our strategies for surviving in the world. I don't know, I got kind of inspired there. I took the wand and tapped it to my head.
I think I'm following the idea that there's a kind of infinite variety makes sense. Without more than what we've got so far. Again, I don't know that we have a clear picture of what the good use of magic actually looks like. We definitely have seen a little bit about what can go wrong with magic in all these different ways, and we've seen something about its kind of nature as this incredible potential, and it can go in all these different directions and do all these different forms. But I guess I'm curious if you guys have a sense yet of what magic is really supposed to be for. Is it just a matter of like gathering together money and hoarding it and keeping it safe? Is it a matter of sort of just delighting in the possibilities that are out there and sort of seeing where they might go? Because that's sort of two images that we get in Gringotts and in not Coral, but Ollivander. Or is it? I guess my sense is that we're supposed to sort of be waiting and holding our breath like Harry to see what Hogwarts is all about and see what that picture of magic is supposed to look like. But again, it's interesting to me that we're kept from sort of seeing the goal of what this is actually all for. And I think education is really that way too. I never looked forward to going back to school.
No, I think that's a great question. I definitely don't have an answer. Maybe it is tied to the fact that we aren't at the school yet. But I mean, who are we kidding? I did look forward to going back to school, but how often, I don't know if you guys ever, well, shoot, we all went to St. John's. Didn't somebody ever ask you, like, well, what's that good for? Or what are you going to do with that? I always get that question from, a student or two, a senior, like, well, I need to major in something that's going to get me a job, right? So this idea that there is like an end that's, finite, or I think that's definitely a thought about education. I don't know if it's just proper to the United States, but probably my guess is proper to like the entire industrialized West, that like education is for the labor market. Like we need to teach kids to be workers, and maybe they're not just factory workers, but they're to be doctors and lawyers and engineers and et cetera, et cetera. But I think learning as an avenue towards employment is definitely like a something that whenever we get to the point in this series where they would do education, I always found that part like that's ridiculous. Like they should just stay in school and keep taking classes. Like the jobs seem so beneath all of the cool stuff that they're learning. Like and let's be real, like being an adult sometimes sucks. Like I would totally rather to be in school and continue to take classes and learn and learn and learn. And sometimes like having a real, big kid job is like, wow, like this is such a derivative compared to like what I was learning in school. And yet the purpose of school is to get me a job. I don't know.
It's interesting because it's like we have stages of further encapsulation of our beings, right? Like we start off with infinite potential. We can be anything. We're babies. And then we start to grow and we have hair and we seem to have a certain color hair and color eyes. And then we have a certain IQ and we move through the world in a certain way. And then it's time for secondary school. And that's a further encapsulation, right? Like, are you going to, and depending on the country you're in. So if you're in German, you know whether you're going to go be blue collar or white collar or what. And then once you get out of school, there's a further encapsulation or even less of your being gets pulled into your job, right? Like you're not jumping on monkey bars every day as well as like doing chemistry probably, unless you do CrossFit and are a chemist. But it's as if how the magic manifests in one's life, the ways that one manifests it become more and more constrained, but also more and more sophisticated for that reason. So rather than being able to say produce every phoneme as a baby can, and everybody bewails that, they're like, what if I could still do that? It's like, you'd still not be good at speaking because you haven't practiced. But instead you could say write like a wonderful writer, or speak like an orator like a Winston Churchill, or write like a J.K. Rowling, or maybe a Virgil, let's say that. And so you give up the breadth, it seems, of experience and of activities in order to get into the nuance and to master particular aspects of reality. And so when I look at magic now, it is such a mystery at the beginning of this text. Everything is new. It's sort of like potential. And Harry even says he wants 8 eyes to see everything. And so the experience of potential or of talent or of newness or anomaly can be that, right? That you don't understand it all or the end of it all, but you're just so interested in it. You're giving all your attention to it, almost autistically, which is interesting because that seems to be a disease, or not disease, but a condition that can come about due to increased exposure to testosterone during fetal stages, which means that autism is actually hyper being a boy, which means that you hyper focus on one thing and to the exclusion of others, which seems to also be the process of life. That we're going to go from the unknown with the magic here, which I'm paralleling with life, to knowing how it is going to manifest. And that's also why I think, and I agree with all of you, especially what you just said, Sarah, that going into education with the end in mind, thinking that you know the end, and that it could be something as partially as simply having a job is not exactly the right mindset, is incorrect, because you have no idea who it is you are when you start your education. But ideally, by the end of it, you have a better idea and thus can choose the profession most reflective of you. And hopefully there is one that sort of reflects you. I know all three of us have trouble with that. Well, I know we had a lot of audio issues today, but we'll figure out a way to resolve those. Did you all have any final thoughts you wanted to end on before we embark off to the Hogwarts Express and finally get to Hogwarts in our next conversation?
Did you have a question you wanted to ask about, like, what we thought we would teach, or?
Yes, yeah, but I kind of want to save that for the next recording in hopes that in the next recording we're sailing smooth. Just because.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. Even though it seems so
and then
clear
I
now.
think also the question about like where we would sort. I think what we're about to discover is we'll have the sorting hat pretty soon, and so we can talk about that, in the next go around.
Okay, so we'll talk about where we think we would be sorted. I think we'll soon talk about whether we identify more with the students or with the teachers now, and also what was the third one that we were just talking about?
What we would
teach. We would teach. Yes, we were texting about that, and I think that'd be, or and I guess we can invert that too and say what our favorite subjects might be while we were there. And I suppose
if we were a student.
That's so funny because I'm even tempted to say I suppose it would be teacher dependent, right? Because those Lupin and Mad Eye Moody years would be good years to be in the defense of the dark arts. All right, y'all. Well,
I did want to throw out one thing from the fairy stories reading. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at that yet, but there is a link to it that I think, Sarah, you send out, and you can Google that and find it easily, like for free online. It's a long lecture. It sort of rambles all over the place. But
I have a truncated version that I gave my students that I like cut out a lot of the
okay
the rambles.
No, I think it's worth reading in its entirety, but it is long. But I just wanted to to jump to one of the interesting things that he mentions there. He kind of coins this word eucatastrophe, which he explains like what he means by that. And so if you just control F that word EU and then catastrophe, like read
but bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, so mountain, the lonely mountain.
Well, it's what he has to say about the sense in which that is like the essence of fairy story. He means by it something like a happy ending, actually.
And he means like that moment in the story where it doesn't deny suffering, but like the suffering is transformed into something sudden and joyful. So like
the turn,
the sudden joy's turn.
Yeah. And I find it really interesting that what we get in this book is kind of a series of the book starts with one, right? Harry lives and everyone's joyful. But then also in these chapters where Hagrid comes in and bursts through the door and tells Harry, "You're a wizard," and then so that's a kind of little eucatastrophe there too, because it's like everything that you've dreamed about forever has finally come true, but it doesn't undo the sadness of all those years, right? And it's essential that it doesn't, and that somehow that's brought up into.
It is a total renovelization of experience and changes the structure of one's life too, which is interesting because Now he knows like there's a next part of his life, and that was only one part, and that's not his whole being, but only one aspect of it. So it's like a eucatastrophe. And I'll read the essay so I can actually speak to this appropriately. It's a moment in which you have to think, or an action happens which changes the course of your life, which also changes how you have to think about your life, and thus think about what it is you are as a being. Because of course he learns he's a magical being, and he's got these roots that he didn't even know about. And this was always true, but he didn't know it was true. And so now it's time for him to reconceptualize everything. And well, I suppose it's a good time to go get an education.
And just on the note of that essay, there's the other part of that essay that I think the chapters that we talked about and read for today, that's like really germane, is the idea of recovery, where Tolkien describes recovery as like a regaining of a clear view, that the thing that a fantasy story can give a reader is this newfound cleansed appreciation for the ordinary, because it is ennobled and made magical in this fantastical secondary world. So, for example, books, or a bank, the train,
underground, right? Harry,
yeah,
it's like bemused by the things that used to seem ordinary. Now, after he's seen all this other stuff, he's like kind of stunned, and Hagrid's like, are you okay?
Like the parking meter, for example, that Hagrid doesn't understand, or a broomstick, something that Harry certainly, I mean, he lived in a closet, and broomsticks would be just a memory of something past, but now it's this thing that every kid wants, right, is a broomstick,
because they live in worlds where the functions of objects are totally different.
Yeah, and Tolkien says that is one of the things that a fantasy story can give a reader, is this it's a gift for when you close the book. It's not something that you almost experience as you're reading it, but that when I go outside and I look at a brick wall and I think to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I were to tap 3 up and 2 across, and boom, I get a portal in a new like magical world. Like it transforms the ordinary brick wall that you walk by every day to get to the bus.
So it's precisely like the Mino, in that when we find that the world is much larger than we expected to be, and perhaps we are much larger than we expected ourselves to be, and when we're confronted with that which we do not know or understand, things become renovelized, and again our interest and our attention is grasped.
And I think this book series, for example, is a great meta example of what she's doing on the page, that like for so many people this is the book that recovers reading, or imagination for a lot of people. I mean, we're talking about it for 70 minutes, for God's sake. So anyway.
Well, hopefully we can renovelize some people's experiences as well, because what is the mundane but that which you no longer see? And
right.
Well, so y'all, shall we do this again on chapters 6 and 7? Do those sound good? 6, 7, and 8. 6 and 7 look pretty long.
Okay. 6 and 7 sounds
Sorting
good.
Hat, the journey from platform 9 3/4 in the Sorting Hat, and so it looks like we'll just then get into Hogwarts. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Meet the my too soon mentioned Ron Weasley friend, Harry's rather. All right, well, y'all, we have to come up with some sort of spell to say at the end of this, but I suppose the spell I'll say to y'all today will be goodbye.
All right, we'll see you. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
See you soon.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.